Hi, today we are going to discuss our learning objective. It says discuss the significance of the interactions that prokaryotes and protists have with other organisms, including humans. So, with our interactions with organisms, they can be cooperative interactions where they benefit populations, or they can be competitive interactions that will fight for different resources. And when we talk about interactions between species, we talk about symbiosis. And symbiotic relationships can be beneficial, harmful, or neutral. And in this slide, I chose to represent them by a plus, a minus, and a zero. Because that brings us to our table here that shows us the different types of symbiotic relationships. So in mutualism, you have a positive or a beneficial relationship between the two different species. Amensalism, you'll have a negative effect or a harmful effect on one and a neutral effect on the other species. Commensalism, there is a positive effect on one and a neutral effect on the other. And in neutralism, both species are not affected. And then the last example that we have is parasitism. And in parasitism, one species is benefited while the other one is harmed. So we're going to take a look at some of these relationships within our environment, and we're going to start with the prokaryotic interactions. And E. coli is an example of a mutualistic interaction. And that might be a surprise to some because a lot of times we hear about E. coli causing issues in infections or diseases. However, there are some strands of E. coli that are beneficial, and E. coli, they live in our intestines, and they get their nutrients within our intestines, and then we receive from them vitamin K. So in this relationship, both species are benefited. The next example we have is amensalism, and that is an example is Lucilia sericata. And with this, it's a bacteria and it produces a protein that kills the Staphylococcus aureus. So another example we have is commensalism, and that example that I'm using today is Staphylococcus epidermidis. And with this bacteria, it will eat host dead skin as their nutrients, and then that host is not affected at all. And then the last example I have is parasitism, and this is an example of the S. aureus, and with this bacteria, it lives in humans or on humans and on animals, and it can cause infection or contamination of food. And with this, one of the main or well-known types of infections when it comes to different livestock, whether that be pigs or cattle or chickens, is bovine mastitis or mastist. And a lot of times animals then will present with weakness and become septic with septicemia. So there are some benefits of these interactions too, and there are some benefits of the cooperative interactions. So when groups of organisms work together, and biofilms is an example of this. It's a collection of organisms. Now these organisms can be the same organism, or they can be a combination of different ones. And when they're the combination of different ones, one of the organisms will also often produce substances that the other one needs. And examples of where they can benefit other organisms is that biofilms are known to be early colonizers. They also help in plant protection, as well as water waste treatment and corrosion inhibiting. So we've talked a lot about the impact on humans, and one thing with the impact with humans, the types of organisms that interact will vary depending on the environment that they're in. So when we look at just humans as the example, there's different organisms that are found in different parts of the body, whether that be your mouth, your skin, or your intestines. And these organisms or bacteria that is found in the body often are referred to as microbiomes, and there are resident microbiota that always live in the body, and there's also transient microbiota which temporarily lives in the body, and that is a lot of what we have seen too. In those temporary ones, they're often pathogenic and can cause disease. So we also want to discuss the significance of protist interactions on other organisms. So protists, they are primary producers for many organisms, especially in the aquatic environment. And an example of this, and I have the image over there, is the dinoflagellates, and they will help produce food for other organisms. So an example of mutualism when it comes to protists are the zooxanthellae, and they create food for the coral reef, and then the coral reef gives the components back to them that they need for photosynthesis. And the last one here is parasitism, and our example here is the Giardia, and this is a disease-causing protozoa, and it affects the absorption of nutrients in our stomach, and it can affect both animals and people, and it often presents as diarrhea or stomach cramps or even nausea. And then protists also have significant interactions with plants. Some examples here are the saprobes, and they feed on plants, and they act as decomposers, and then they return those inorganic nutrients back to the water and soil, and that then allows the organisms living in the water and soil to benefit. And then we have the Plasmopara viticola, and this causes a watery mildew on grapes, and it stunts the growth, causes the leaves to wither, so it's impacting the health of the grapes. So kind of our organism interaction summary. Organisms have a positive, negative, and neutral effect on each other. And the health of the organisms and the environment are dependent on those interactions. And then the next couple slides here are just my references. Thank you.